Okay, so yesterday we talked about square and square roots. Today we're going to talk about cube and cube roots. So a square is, a square. And what makes a square special is that all of the dimensions of the square are the same. So if I know that this side length is 4 centimeters, then I know that this side length is 4 centimeters. And in order to get the area, we would multiply our length times our width. So this would be like our length, and this is our width. It honestly doesn't matter because they're the same. So our area would equal 4 centimeters times 4 centimeters. 4 times 4 is 16. And we have our units are centimeters, and since there are 2 of them, it is centimeter square. Now, squares are 2-dimensional shapes, so everything revolves around a 2, okay? Now, if we go backwards, that would be like, okay, so I told you that the area was 81. What are the roots? Well, that's a kind of complicated question, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is we would use our square root button, this guy, and we would put 81. So this is the area. We're trying to figure out what the square root is. So we know that 9 times 9 is 81, so the root is 9. However, we're not sure if it was 2 positives that multiplied to get to the 81, or if it was 2 negatives to multiply to get to the 81. So your answer is kind of 2 answers. It could have been a positive or a negative 9 that multiplied to get to that 81. So the roots are both positive and negative 9. So this is what square roots are. Now on this shelf, we didn't really talk about it, but normally if you don't see a number, it is a 2 because I want to know the square root. But today we're going to talk about cube roots. So cube roots is just another dimension. It's talking about a cube in our 3rd dimension. So it's just the basic square as well as the square root is, but it has this extra element of height. So we can't use area to figure out all the stuff that could fit in here. Instead, we use this term volume. And we're going to talk about that later this year. But volume is your basic length times width, but then there's that dimension of height where we've stacked all these cute little squares on top of each other. So the volume for this is length times width times height. So you have 1, 2, 3 lengths that you are multiplying together, which is why this is called a cube, because there are 3 of them. For the square and square roots, we only had 2 dimensions that we were multiplying, okay? So this is now a 3D shape. So let's say that one of the side lengths was 2. Okay, well, we know that because it's a perfect cube, this length also has to be 2, and the height has to be 2 as well. So to figure out the volume, and let's just say these are also centimeters, we would multiply 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8 centimeters, and we have 1, 2, 3 of them, so it'll be cubed. So everything with the 3D shapes with the cube is all 3. Square is 2, cube is 3, okay? Now, if we go backwards, so let's say that we're going to be talking about the cube root of 64, okay? So if I said the volume this time is 64, so what is the root? Okay, now we type this in slightly different into our calculator, and instead of putting a 2 on the shelf, we have 3 dimensions, so we're putting a 3 on the shelf. We're basically looking for a triplet, okay? So then I'm going to put my 64, my area, underneath my root, or my radical. So that's still the same, but instead of having a 2, we have a 3. So we have to type that a little bit differently. So in our calculators, we type 3, and then second and this x squared button. See how there's a blue x or a boxy button on top of the radical? Oops, sorry, now you can see it. This guy right here is what we're trying to get to, so that's why we type the 3 first, and then we shift and then press this button. Now notice that my 3 got really small, and now he looks like he's sitting on our shelf, which is what we want. Then we type in 64, and now we can see that our root is 4. Oh, lovely. So the roots of 64 are 4. Okay, so that means that my cube has dimensions of 4, 4, and 4 for all of it, okay? Now, let's figure out, what about negatives? Because negatives on our square roots mean a big deal. Means that we have an imaginary, right? So if I said I wanted the square root of negative 25, you would say, I can't do that. There's not 2 numbers that multiply to get to a negative number, so this one is imaginary. So we use the little case I for that. But for the cube roots, let's think about this. So let's say I wanted to know if, I know that we can't measure in negatives, but pretending if my volume was negative 64 units, could we in fact do that? So let's just check with the calculator, and then I'll explain what happened. So we're going to put our 3 on our shelf again. So we type 3 second, and then it's this X with the boxy button. And they look slightly different on every calculator. So if you're using the Desmos version, it's a little bit different. But you're looking for basically this box on top of the shelf. And you want to make sure that this guy gets to be little and sits on your shelf. And then we're going to type in negative 64. Now if it was the square root, it would say error. But this one says negative 4. So the roots, if our volume is negative 64, our roots are negative 4. And the reason that this works is because negative 4 times negative 4 is our 16. But now I'm multiplying by another negative 4. So 16 times negative 4 gives us our negative 64. So what this means that square and square roots always have a positive and a negative version of this answer. And this means that cube roots, depending on whatever sign it has for the volume, that is what sign you keep in the answer. So if your volume is negative, then you're going to have a negative root. If your volume is positive, you're going to have a positive root. And that's for our cube and cube roots, okay? Square roots will always be plus minus because you could have either the positives or the negatives. Okay, so that being said, let's try some of these. So all we're going to do on these guys is just type them in. So this is just giving us a chance to practice. So 3 second X with a box, and we're going to do 343 and see what the cube root of 343 is, and that is positive 7. So we're going to write a 7 down. Again, this isn't a plus minus 7. If this is positive, your answer is positive. If this was negative, your answer would be negative because we are looking at cube roots, so cube on our shelf. Let's do one more. Let's do this guy. He's kind of big, right? Sorry, I just scoot things over. Okay, 3 second X with the boxy button, 2744, and that gives us a root of 14. So that is our answer. That means that 14 times 14 times 14, so 3 times itself will multiply to give us 2744. And let's just check. 14 times 14 times 14 is 2744. Okay, now this is the same thing as this little exponent right here. There are 3 14s. So this 15 to the third power means that I have 15 times 15 times 15. Exponents are used as shortcuts to help us out. And we'll talk more about exponents in another lesson. But, so 15. Now, we can type 15 times 15 times 15 if we want to, and we get 3375. The shortcut is to use that X with the boxy button. So the opposite of what we just did, because the opposite of cube is cube root, and the opposite of cube root is cube. So we're going to type 15, and we're going to press the X with the boxy button, which should give us a little exponent, and we're going to type a 3 in, and we get the same answer. Okay, so that's how you type it as a shortcut in our calculator, and it's important to know how to use all the buttons in the calculators. So we're going to do the same thing with 14. We know that it's going to be 2744, so we're just going to check it. 14 to the third power is 2744. Okay, so this is what we are doing today. If you have questions, please ask your teacher, and have a great day. Bye, guys.